Hello, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. On behalf of Thakur Ramnarayan College of Law, I, Vaishnavi Talekar, would like to welcome you all for today's webinar on the topic COVID-19 and impact on IBC process challenges. I would like to introduce to you our guest speaker for today, Advocate Rajdeep Lahiri sir. Sir is known to be an attorney, an advocate, and a counsel. He has completed his LLB from University of Calcutta and has done PGDBL from National University of Juridical Sciences. Sir has also completed his LLM from Annamalai and done PGD Securities Law from University of Mumbai. Sir has done a certificate diploma in contracts from Harvard University. He is an adjunct professor of law and the founder of Vakil Mitra. Sir, we are privileged to have you with us today. Before we begin with the webinar, I would like to inform all the participants that at the end of the webinar, we would be running a live questionnaire session. So you are requested to type your doubts in the chat box below. I request you all to please maintain the decorum throughout the session. The feedback forms will be sent to you at the end of the webinar. So all the participants are requested to fill the form to receive the e-certificates. The certificates shall be issued within 15 working days. We would now like to hear from you, sir. The platform is all yours.
Thank you, Vaishali. I'm deeply humbled, honored, and it's a fantastic platform to be in. And thank you for the invitation. And really, the topic, as we all know, very intrinsically involved with the current situation and the predicament that that is currently ensuing everywhere, and it is such a problem, such a grave problem, that it has touched everyone's lives. So we are not just talking of individuals, we're just not talking of litigants, but we are also talking on professionals, and professionals, and by professionals I mean every professional, be that be it an advocate, be it a doctor, an engineer, a cost accountant, chartered accountant, company secretary, etc., etc. And so the topic really, in all practically, makes sense, and it's really a challenge as to how to deal with this and the future ahead. So COVID-19 and impact on IBC process challenges. Can we just start our PPT? Perfect. So COVID-19 and the impact on IBC process, a little forward on this entire presentation, and the decision really to do such a kind of a webinar or a video session or a presentation of sorts is that, apart from the fact that I am a corporate litigation lawyer and of course general litigation practice, this is such an aspect which of course has been making headlines for quite some time. And the reason why I chose the first slide to be this kind of a picture, so there is a some sort of an intrinsic value attached to this. It speaks of everything. So it speaks of the minuscule, of a minuscule being attacking the entire world, rocking the entire economies right till its foundation. And a person and a man wearing mask, of course, that is the standard operating procedures that is being issued by the governments worldwide. And it is overseeing an economy which is rocked till its foundation. A downward curve, a recessive curve, with panic, with a future which we can't perhaps conceive or perceive with regards to the present situation which is ensuing right now, and something which is unprecedented of sorts. That is the least which I can say for now. So this is the baseline and this is the intention to explain why the government really had come out with this entire code, with the procedures, substantive, and in the wisdom of the legislature. What was the intention behind coming out with such a code, which in essence repealed many of the long existing acts or the provisions which were existing much before the code, which also led to a complete amendment, almost a complete amendment to an amendment of the Companies Act of 2013, and a consolidation of all these acts, which we are going to see, which if we read the statement of objectives that was passed by the legislature in coming up with this brand new code, we will see that the legislature in their own wisdom had already conceived of the fact that the existing corporate insolvency regime of our country was not adequate at all. With that, I'll commence. Can we have the next slide? So I am Rajdeep. I am an advocate, practice Pan India, and today's topic, COVID-19 and impact on IBC process, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. For the sake of brevity, we will call it as the code or IBC. So, of course, viewer discretion not advised. I am a very open-minded person. So, we'll try not to interrupt the video session, but if anybody has a very intriguing question, which they want to ask, I am free to allow such a question at the end of of every segmented session. Right. So next slide, please. Again, at the foremost, I would like to say, and this is something which is quoted by me. I will read that these are terrifying times. It has taught us that power and might is not always tall and perpetual. It has taught us resilience, patience, and unity. It has also taught us that the most insignificant one, the most irrelevantly small one, can stop the world. And with that, can we have just a very short moment of silence for all the frontier workers? And really, it's the entire future is all dependent on the professionals and the people who are on the front lines. So we'll have a moment of silence for this. Right. So COVID-19, the next slide. So COVID-19 has, of course, rattled the entire world apart. And of course, with that being said, COVID-19, in essence, when it first started, we've seen, as litigating advocates, we've seen that especially in the NCLTs, which is the adjudicating authority, which is the tribunal who is in charge of expounding the law on the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code and the rules and provisions contained therein. So the NCLT was still functioning countrywide. We've seen a lot of professionals going to a lot of courts. We've seen a lot of offices being opened. The other tribunals, even the High Court, to some extent it was open. But the COVID-19, as we stand today, we are seeing some alarming facts and data which is coming in, which is in the next slide, and that is important. Can we have the next slide, please? And that is important. Why? Because of the fact that in the entire world over, these are figures which are portraying the current situation of indirectly a current situation of the economy, which we are headed to, and we are hoping that the vaccine or a preventive measure or medicine comes out soon. We have a very old saying in Hindi, "Jaan hai to jahan hai." So if people are not able to contain the spread, or if there is such rampant active cases, I've just been informed that there's again an exponential rise, touching about 9,000 active cases today on a one-day jump, which is again a record. So these kind of situations are happening everywhere. We have to understand that at a very micro and a macroeconomic level. And these are really, this is economics. And why is this economics? Why? Because this will directly hamper the entire economic structure, or it will directly hamper the industries which is presently functioning everywhere. You will not, you will not have factories functioning. You will have mass retrenchments. You will have a different sort of culture which will not enable, which will not really enable the proper and the optimum functioning of any industry or any factory per se, and which of course in the times to come will lead to an exponential rise of insolvency and bankruptcy related cases. If people do not have that earning or the purchasing power, if the companies in the, let's say in the manufacturing unit is unable to sell their products, if there is nobody to purchase that, so the delicate balance between supply and demand, the basis, the fundamental basis for all economics, for all economies in the world, it will lead to a complete collapse. So this is the situation which is there worldwide. I wanted to start with this to give a perspective as to where this presentation is coming from, where this entire, the idea behind such a subject is coming from. The next slide. The code. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code had come out with a certain objective. It had come out with the objective, and a very basic objective, which in essence repealed many of the long-standing acts. We had the SICA, we still have the provincial insolvency and the bankruptcy acts and the presidency insolvency acts, which of course is applicable sparingly. And in Bombay especially, it is only filed before the Bombay High Court. So these acts had a fundamental, according to me, had a very fundamental flaw. According to me, the fundamental flaw which existed at the time of, or at the time of the, the tribunals or the courts expounding the provisions which were laid down in the Sikh Industries Act, the SICA, or the subsequent the BIFR, which was the board constituted under SICA. To some extent, even the SARFAISI Act, which for its execution, some of the provisions lay with the Chief Metropolitan Magistrates Court under the Section 14 of the SARFAISI Act. Even DRT to some extent, the Debt Recovery Tribunals, and the RDDB Act, which forms a part of the DRT tribunal of the DRTs of the country. According to me, the fundamental proposition was not in some sense a deterrence to file a complaint or to file a petition with the tribunals which were constituted under these acts. No. According to me, the fundamental flaw which existed is the execution, is the time taken. We've all heard in our contract courses, in the contract laws, the time is the essence of a contract. I would go one step ahead and say that time is not only the essence of a contract, but time is the essence for every sort of litigation. We've all heard of folklore speaking about civil cases taking years and years together. We've all heard of cases filed before the Small Causes Court, again taking years and years for it to reach its logical end. Of course, about a year back, we had an excellent proposition which was given by the High Court of Bombay, at Bombay, giving all the judges of the Small Causes Court and the practitioners of the Small Causes Court certain very strict timelines to complete cases that were filed and that had taken a significant amount of time. So according to me, time was the biggest factor which really gave some sort of a determinate wisdom or a determinate factor for the legislature and the judiciary, and of course the other bodies that were involved, the law framers, the reports, and the legal advisors from the law department and the law commission officers, which gave them the feeling that the previous regime, that the regime that existed before the entire code was in place, had a fatal flaw, which was the execution. The execution of the complaints or the petitions that were filed for the due recovery of the dues was taking a lot of time. As a result of which, the stakeholders, the aggrieved parties, the stakeholders, the directors, the financial institutions who are also the stakeholders who had loaned out these financial assistance, were all losing, number one, interest in both the sense. They were again losing focus, that they had to come out of these stressed assets or the bad debts and look into other avenues. It also gave a very bad name to certain industries, which, even if we had a good player or a genuine player in that particular industry, the financial institutions with their reasonable, keeping all the reasonableness with them, and by way of precedence, they were very skeptical in indulging into further financial assistance in those industries, like the manufacturing industry, or they could be the technology, or they could be the other industries like that. So the previous regime, as we can see from this paper cuttings that I have tried to put forth, on the bottom right, we can see that the recovery made in the previous regime. So previous regime, I would say the one before IBC, before the incorporation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, was about 35,000 crores. Of course, that was for financial year 2018-19. There were bank NPAs, right? There was a recovery rate which was very less, and the average time taken for resolution was 1,550 days, which is of course an understatement, because I have seen BIFR cases going for years, and that is a fact, because there were so many intricacies involved. There were so many rules and provisions. We also had an opportunity for numerous intervention applications to be filed in a simplistic case where a bank had given loan to a body corporate. There will be instances where I am not saying that there will not be any room for arguments for the borrower, for the person who has availed financial assistance from these financial institutes or from the banks. I am not saying that. But I'm saying there was so much room for so much of intricacies to crop up that it was really impossible for the tribunals to really focus on the core issue. And under IBC, we see that there is a lot of recovery that's happening. The NPAs have come down. NPAs are non-performing assets, which is again a definition given by the Reserve Bank of India, and which is, of course, their interpretation is changed from time to time. NPAs and SMAs, stressed assets, the recovery rate has gone up. Even though I would not want to term it as recovery, because that is explicitly barred from being used under IBC. It is a beneficial legislation. It helps, it aids in the stressed asset, that is the stressed company, to recover, to form a sort of a resolution of sorts. It also aids in the company to resolve all the outstandings which is present as on date of filing or before that. Of course, there are rules and regulations in the finer print of the code. It aids in accumulating all of that, presenting them in the form of a committee of creditors, and resolve all of that. So it is a beneficial resolution of sorts. Hence, I will not use the word recovery rate, but we all understand the spirit of the word being used over here. So the rate for which the recovery of dues due to these financial institutions and banks, that has gone up significantly. And the average time taken for resolution is 324 days. Of course, there is an amendment. We'll talk on that. So the entire code, in its own sense, has stipulated very strict timelines, and we have to understand why this is stressed time and again by the adjudicating authorities, which is the National Company Law Tribunals. For the sake of brevity, we'll call them the adjudicating authorities, or we'll call them the NCLTs, with due respect. So why so much of stress has been time and again given for adhering to the timelines that is stipulated, especially under IBC, because we are talking on IBC. So I'll strictly maintain myself to only the provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. It is because time is the only essence. Time is the essence of the entire code. So it has given strict timelines, and we'll go through those timelines if time permits. But the entire process, right from the filing of the petition, which could be under various sections, we'll come to that. Right from the initial timeline, which is required for the entire resolution to be completed, and it also gives leeway for an extension of the timeline. Now it has come down to 330 days, but of course we are seeing in high-end resolution cases where there are thousands of crores which is involved for various conglomerates. So the extension is also given in the rarest of rare cases, which exceeds 330 days. And of course, there is also a time limit, which is something unprecedented. Everything is unprecedented in IBC. Something which is also unprecedented, and something which to my opinion is an outstanding job of the legislature and the judiciary alike, and the people who were involved in the making of this provision, is that there is a timeline in the liquidation process itself. Because I've seen in the 1956 Act, we have seen admissions going, an expedited hearing on the admission, an expedited hearing on the appointment of the liquidator, etc. But in the process of liquidation, we have seen the company being stuck for various reasons, of course, and rightly or wrongly, so they were all stuck in the process of the ultimate process of the complete winding up of the company for years together. So this is one of the major aspects which the code has also dealt. Can we have the next slide? So we'll go back to some origins of this code. I would say that even in the Companies Act, we have to understand that commercial activity has always been an integral part of human beings. We've all heard of the barter systems, etc., in the centuries back, of course. And we've also seen a lot of noted cases, especially in the UK and US, where slowly the evolution from the barter system to a commercial activity where they're keeping a third entity as a common entity of exchange, which we now known as currency. So that was it. And in India, we've always seen that because of the topography of India, and of course the vastness that we hold of our country, on the commercial front, by way of these reports, we have always seen that we've always been a step behind, and that's the sad story of it. And we've, of course, so by way of the Law Commission, in the 26th report in 1964, and mind you, in the Companies Act 1956, in the 26th report of the Law Commission, it recommended reformation of the personal insolvency laws. So the report, as it was at that point of time, was a very substantive report. I've had the privilege of going through that report once, and in detail it presented that there has to be a reformed a view and a reform structure, a very structured form of the personal insolvency laws, where there are dues given to even to body corporates and to individuals alike. But that was never acted upon. In 1985, we had the Tiwari Committee, and it based its recommendation. So that recommendation is also used in the making of the present code. Is also again taking cue from the 26th report of the Law Commission. It took cue. It said that we had a very fragmented structure. We had a very fragmented provision and rules and guidelines, which enabled for the recovery of dues, which enabled creditors to go for their dues from the debtors. And the Tiwari Committee based its recommendation from the 26th report and framed its own guidelines, which stated about again consolidation of all the then existing rules and regulations which govern recovery of dues. In 1999, very important, we had the VB Iradi Committee, which again was a flashpoint in the entire corporate bankruptcy regime. Which was a flashpoint of the entire corporate bankruptcy. So, for the first time, it actually raised its doubts as to the optimal functionality of this entire corporate bankruptcy regime as it existed then. The NL Mitra Committee in 2001, of course, it recommended a comprehensive bankruptcy code. So, that was when, for the first time, a committee that old, a committee that old, had introduced a system and wanted to introduce a system which required the incorporation of certain very specified tribunals, which will be specified both for the members or the judges and the professionals and the practicing professionals who will be practicing in those tribunals alike. It said in spirit, in letter in spirit, that these will be certain tribunals which will only take certain corporate matters which will be guided by a separate act or maybe an amendment or a code in itself. Till the time the code is not in existence, the provisions of the Companies Act may be applicable. But it did say in 2001, which resulted in the amendment, a substantive amendment in 2002 of the Companies Act, which introduced to the world the concepts of the NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal, and the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, Company Law Appellate Tribunal, which introduced these words and the concepts for the first time to the world. Right. We all know the code came into May 28, 2016. So, I'm sorry, uh,
Okay. Mama, hello. To all the participants, we are really sorry. We are facing a connection issue. So please wait back. To
Am I
all the
audible?
participants,
Hello. Am I audible? Okay. Okay. Perfect. So, okay. So, right. So we were in the era where in 2001 the NL Mitra committee had for the first time recommended that there should be a robust bankruptcy code or a regime of sorts, which resulted in the legislature in introducing the concepts of NCLT and NCLAT for the very first time. And if we read the Companies Act, it indeed says, it indeed speaks that there should be an introduction and there should be an incorporation of a specified tribunal which will have the capacity and the efficiency and the knowledge and the power to deal in corporate cases or the cases involving commercial activities, or in the cases where there is a commercial resolution or recovery of debt as it had at that point of time, as a concept existed at that point of time, should be introduced. So that was in 2002. After more than a decade, in May 28, 2016, the code as we know right now had come into place. Of course, no cases were filed, and there was a lot of intricacies that had to be dealt with. The practical aspects as to the places, the courtrooms, the members, the appointment of members, the allocation of staff. So that took a lot of time, and in and around the month of May 2016, we started to have a flurry of cases, and of course, one of the first cases, the Innovative Industries cases, traversed the annals, the hallowed annals of the Honorable Supreme Court of India, which again, to a very great deal, to a very great extent, propounded and interpreted various provisions which were required for the urgent intervention of the Supreme. November 25th, 2016, we bid adieu to the Sikh Industries Act. The SICA was repealed finally, and along with it, the AIFR and the BIFR, which were the boards and the appellate courts which were constituted under this act. And one of the primary reasons why the entire legislature took a paradigm shift, again, I will repeat, it is time. Can we have the next slide? So some of the salient features of the code, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The code provides creditors with a mechanism to initiate corporate insolvency resolution process, or CIRP as we know, if a debtor is unable to pay its debts. Debts is defined under section 311. The code also makes a distinction between somebody known as an operational creditor and somebody known as a financial creditor, which is again unprecedented. You will not find this kind of distinction anywhere in any of the other domestic acts. A financial creditor is one whose relationship with the debtor is a pure financial contract, where an amount has been provided to the debtor against the consideration of time value of money or by way of financial assistance. So a financial creditor is a person whose relationship with the debtor is of a financial contract, where a bank is lending loan. So even in the current scenario, a person, let's say an individual or a body corporate or an industry, will not be in a capacity to take a financial assistance, where even against that financial assistance there has to be a mortgage, there has to be something which is to be kept in lien, and that power as of today is not in existence, but it is again a question of survival. So in anticipation that COVID-19, maybe in the next few months, maybe if there is a miracle drug, or if the vaccine is out, let's say in the next 2 months or in the next 1 month or in the next 1 year. So that anticipation capacity, that patience will have to be present with every body corporate, with every individual, because again, I said in it is said at the very beginning that this situation is unprecedented. It has raised a lot of doubts. It has it has created a sort of imbalance between the demand and supply, the purchasing power, or the capacity for this entire intrinsic transaction of money, uh, and the balance sheets of companies, especially this will be reflected in the next quarter. It has disbalanced everything. So even in a present situation, a financial creditor who has, let's say, in one situation, the bank has given loan to somebody because the government has now come out with with a notification or maybe a media briefing saying that giving various sorts of advantages to, like, let's say, you don't have to pay rents, etc. Or it has directed that the RBI should direct the banks to give us moratorium on the repayment on the repayment by the by various debtors. So with the present situation, if we read this, the financial creditor is one whose relationship with the debtor is a pure financial contract. So there will be mortgage deeds, there will be financial assistance deeds, there will be debt syndications, etc., where an amount has been provided to debtor against consideration of time value of money, which is the interest, which is the very base, which is the reason why banks and financial institutions are in this business of lending money or by way of financial assistance. Recent reforms being addressed, the concerns of home buyers by treating them as financial creditors. I've also stated it is Vide writ petition civil number 43 of 2019. It was propounded by the Supreme Court of India that even home buyers, so if you are in a position to buy a house or a unit or a flat anywhere, and for some reason, for any reason, could be external, internal, the builder or the company who's in the construction business, who's actually constructing your unit or the place, is unable to deliver you the flat or is unable to repay according to any contract that you may have entered. Supreme Court of India has said that you will be at par with any financial creditor, and you will be above the rest in the process of disbursement of monies at all. In the absence of applicants having a clear status as to whether applicant is a financial or operational creditor, there may be uncertainty about the priority when receiving dues from the insolvency proceedings. So it has also given a very clear demarcation as to who is supposed to be an operation creditor or a financial creditor. Again, in the present situation, and which is something which we are facing on a daily basis, and there is a great deal of uncertainty. It says that given, so there's various kind of situations with which we can deal in, and I always believe in all practicality, in practical situations which can be done. In one situation where buyer who has reserved his flat in a development project, and a token amount has been given, but because of the COVID-19 situation, the construction, any kind of construction in Bombay or anywhere in the country, is barred, is expressly barred, of course, because of the panic of the spread of the virus, etc. And there, rightly or wrongly, there are reasons for it. So what will happen to that? Will the banks, uh, from where a person like me, who's given a token amount of money to a construction agent or a builder or a construction company for reserving my flat, will the banks then, using this entire situation, can then start the recovery process? Can I then start a recovery process against the construction company? Because now we are not adhering to the timelines. Every timeline has to be relaxed because of these macroeconomic reasons, because of the reasons which has forced us to adhere to because of the COVID-19 situation. So these are the intricacies which of course after the lifting of the lockdown, after normalcy once again ensues, we'll have to see how these goes ahead. An operational creditor is again a creditor under section 3 subsection 10 who has provided goods or services to the debtor, including employees, central and state governments, and also includes advocates fees. So I've seen a lot of advocates. So there are a lot of big law firms or attorneys who filed under section 9 because they provided some sort of service plans. This is for the recovery of the, this is for the dues to be recovered once again. A debtor company may also by itself take recourse to the court if it wants to utilize the mechanism for revival and liquidation. So if a company is unable, so in the present situation, I very interestingly and with a lot of vigor and interest started off a company. I have accumulated talent. I have acquired a lot of talent in my team, and then I have taken a lot of loan from companies, from various family members. We've seen in various big companies that the primary loan borrowings are from the immediate family members. And I've also taken money from various venture capitalists or from various other providers of these financial assistance. But due to this COVID situation, I'm unable to deliver. I am unable to give, or I'm unable to provide my services, or if I'm manufacturing any goods, I'm unable to deliver those. I'm unable to manufacture or deliver these goods. So that has again raised a lot of doubt, has cast a very big shadow on the future of these companies. According to me, as of now, which of course viewer discretion is again advised in this, will lead to a mass exodus of self liquidation, voluntary liquidation, because they started off on a different set of parameters, but those have all changed. Okay, and so that will lead a lot of voluntary may lead. So again, in the event of inability of to pay creditors, a company may choose to go for voluntary insolvency resolution process. This is under Chapter 5, a measure by which the company can itself approach the NCLT for the purpose of revival. Or I would very bluntly say that it is all a question of survival, which is again which is one of the fundamental reasons why the government came out with the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, the Make in India scheme, to save jobs, to save the industry as a whole, and that all manufacturing, all the industries, all the employees, all the sourcing, outsourcing projects, job, and work stays in India, which will again lead to economic revival of sorts. In the next slide, we will come up with certain terms which I have been consistently using all throughout. There's some of the terms which I have not used already. So one are debts. You'll also hear terms such as creditors. So debt in a very informal way, if I have to explain your debt. Of course, we are all well versed with the word debt, but this is about keeping the background of COVID-19 situation. So if we have to talk about debt, one situation could be if you are staying in a rented place and I'm not able to give my the rental accrued to the landlord. Again, I'm in debt. If I am a home buyer and I have reserved a flat for myself and I have only given a token amount of money, and according to the agreement that was entered between me and the construction agent or the company, I have skipped some of the EMIs or some of the tranches of payments that is to be given. Again, I am debt. If I'm a company, if I'm successfully running a company, and I've taken some financial assistance, let's say uh, by way of anything, by way of loan, it could be working capital, etc., LRD, etc. And according to the agreement executed between me and the bank, if I have to make a monthly repayment or if I have to make a quarterly repayment, I've already missed one quarter. I've already missed 3 months. So again, I am in debt. These meanings these words had a different sort of meaning before this entire COVID-19 situation had arisen. But during this time, in the further light of the government giving further relaxations, in the Supreme Court giving further relaxations, in the NCLTs and the appellate tribunals giving further relaxations, which in essence says that the strict timelines, which is there as part of the insolvency and bankruptcy code, that can be relaxed. How it can be relaxed? Some of the examples which I can say. Of course, that's not part of today's discussion, but I would still go ahead and say that some of the timelines is that let's say uh, a person has to give certain information to the representative of the bank while in this entire process of insolvency and bankruptcy, and that is unable to be given. And there's a stipulated time. We've also heard that the stipulated time is 330 days. So in that 330 days of time, the entire resolution, that is the entire rehabilitation of the company, is to be strictly adhered to. In the absence of any resolution or rehabilitation of the company automatically goes for liquidation. So we are seeing that in the presence of the present situation, the company is unable to dissipate information. There is nobody working in the company. Everybody is doing, now we also have the work from home culture, and everybody is doing all their projects, all their office work, or all the commercial activity from their respective houses. And so that is unable to be given. So these sort of timelines will be relaxed. So that will again have a different interpretation altogether in view of the relaxations given by all the concerned authorities and the stakeholders of the code. Creditor, once again, similar to debt, creditor will be in the examples given before. It could be the landlord, it could be the financial institutions, it could be individuals who've given off money to, let's say, companies or to other individuals, etc. So that will again hold a different meaning. Then I've also spoken about applications of the petitions filed under the code. We have under section 7, 9, and 10. In section 7, it is the financial creditor can file, which is in essence the bank and the financial institutions. Section 9 is the operation creditors, and section 10 is the corporate insolvency resolution process, where the company itself wants to come before the respective NCLTs and wants to wind up their business or wants to go into an insolvency process. Of course, in the presence of assets and liabilities. Again, these applications will again hold a different interpretation altogether. And as we speak, a few days back, and of course I'll discuss, it's part of my presentation, the central government has actually relaxed these provisions and has stated that there will not be any fresh applications or petitions that will be filed under these provisions, because in an attempt to save the industries, or in an attempt to save the MSME, the medium small scale industries. We've also heard of something known as an admission. So when an application under section 7, 9, or 10 is filed, after hearing, of course, both the parties or the alternate party, after hearing both the parties, the member, the adjudicating authority will come to a decision whether to allow or reject. So if it is allowed, it will be something known as an admission of the petition, which is filed under section 799. And by way of that admission, the company itself goes into something known as a corporate insolvency resolution process, which is again a paradigm shift from all the previous acts. So in the previous acts, there was a lot of stress on recovery, but this is a corporate insolvency resolution. So there has to be resolution, there has to be rehabilitation. We are assisting the company to come out of its miseries, to come out of its commercial miseries, and to stand up on its legs once again. We also have something known as an IRP or RP, interim resolution person or resolution person. In essence, is a person having vast corporate experience, could be chartered accountant, company secretary, cost accountant, even an advocate. So their duty, even in light of the COVID-19 situation, will increase. And I will, of course, discuss on that. Their duty will also increase. There will be greater usage of technology. There will be greater reliance on effectiveness. There will be a greater reliance on ethics and morality of these key personnel as defined under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, because they are, in a sense, they are the liaison for the company and the committee of creditors. I've missed out on committee of creditors. The committee of creditors, in essence, is a committee of all the creditors against against the debtor company. Because once a application is filed, it is an application filed in them. So once there is an admission of sorts of under these sections, so any and every creditor of that company will join that proceeding in an attempt to resolve their commercial disputes. We've also heard of something known as a moratorium. We've also heard of the moratorium given by the RBI, given by the central government, which in essence says that a moratorium, in essence, is, in bluntly speaking, is that you don't have to pay for a certain period of time, but you have to pay that backlog at some point of time. So moratorium is that. So moratorium in terms of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, under section 14, it says that once a petition is admitted, an admission under section 7, 8, and 9, so there will be moratorium of sorts. So there will be no civil cases that will be filed or will continue to exist against that debtor company. Of course, in moratorium language, we've heard of the central government and the RBI giving moratorium for the banks against its borrowers. Could be independent borrowers, could be corporate borrowers. You've also heard of the term called liquidation, which, of course, if we have studied the term liquidation in the Companies Act of 1956 or in 2013, we know liquidation to be the twilight years of the company in winding up its entire business to arrive at the eventual conclusion as it being wound up, at its existence is no more. It's a juristic entity. Its existence has to be no more, and for that to be no more, it has to traverse to an entire path. A resolution applicant, again, and a resolution plan, they are again technical words. We'll discuss that. They are, in essence, third parties who are willing to take over the management, etc., and the assets and liabilities of the debtor company. So these are some of the terms which, of course, had a different meaning altogether, but in light of the COVID-19 situation, will attain a separate meaning altogether. In the next slide, we've seen quite a lot, a surge of, so this is in essence an IBC data over the years. And this has the sources from the IBBI website. And it's, in essence, it says that in the financial year ending 2017, people were skeptical, people wanted to try out, people wanted to see how this entire code is functioning. They wanted to see the pulse of the adjudicating authority. They want to see how this law is expounded by the judges of the by the judges of the NCLTs all over the country. But it's slowly picked up, and of course, it is on a rise. And every day there are about hundreds of petitions that are filed in a single adjudicating authority itself. So this, by this data, you will see that a tremendous amount of importance and reliance is being given to especially this code. And this is just, we are seeing the admission cases. There are various other data that are available, which speaks about the time limit, which speaks about the time taken for, number one, the resolution of such cases. Number two, how long, on an average, these cases go on, both from the financial creditor side and an operational creditor side, and of course, this voluntary liquidation side. And this is on a rise, a very exciting prospect for every professional. The next slide we come to a very important portion of the presentation, which I thought will be very important to discuss, which are the macro and micro impacts of COVID-19. We've seen that the COVID-19 uh, has resulted in not the complete closure, but the closure of activities. There is no activities done by the industries, of course, apart from the essential supplies and the essential commodities. That apart has led to a massive economic and recessive slowdown, which is the reason why we have a very downward curve. And of course, the stock market is again it's topsy turvy, because the stock market is again like a barometer for a country's economic strength. So it is really showing our economic and recessive slowdown, which is a direct cause of COVID-19 and which will again significantly affect the rise or the fall, or a significant change in the number of cases that will be filed under the provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. We have to remember that the bankruptcy and insolvency, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a commercial act in its entirety. It is there for only dealing in the commercial activities, or dealing in the commercial strengths of companies, or the corporate sector of the country. And any economic and recessive slowdown, meltdown, or any kind of change in the economic status of the company will have a direct effect on the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which of course we are seeing, which of course we'll see on the next slide, the various measures taken by the government. It has also given a massive, we'll go to the previous slide. Sorry. Yeah. So it has, so apart from the economic and recessive slowdown, a direct consequence to that is a rise of unemployment and retrenchment of employees from various factories, units, etc. Because of the simple reason that no business is being conducted and there's no inflow of money. So if there's no inflow of money, there cannot be any outflow of money. So which is very simple business norm which is followed. So there is a rise of unemployment, which will again give a number of which may give rise to a number of cases under Section 9, where employees are retrenched with or without notice and with or without payments, which of course will leave a certain number of employees aggrieved, and which will give the cause of action to file such cases. So that will all depend on the interpretation of certain rules, provisions, meanings of debts in light of the COVID-19 situation. So that remains to be seen. It has again caused supply-demand imbalance. Of course, we've discussed that at the very beginning itself. It has given to a rise of costs. We've all seen, I'll give you a very small example. We've seen a sudden spike in the cost of hand sanitizers, in the cost of masks, which then scrambled the officials of the government to introduce that as list of the essential commodities so as to regulate the price. We've also seen the rise of vegetable markets. We've seen the rise of we will see the rise of various appliances in the course of time. There are short-term, long-term gender impacts. Why? Because now we are breaking barriers. Everybody's now has a work-from-home culture, which will not cause a deterrent for any particular gender, either for any reasons of traveling, etc. Because now most of the work is done online. It is done from the comforts of your house. So it will break barriers on the aspect of gender, and it will have a lasting impact on a longer run. It is shocking the stock markets. Nobody can actually determine what's going to happen in the stock markets. Of course, that will again affect various SEBI provisions, various listed companies in their rules and regulations, again, which may or may not give rise to various insolvency and bankruptcy code cases. And we have new working norms. Like advocates, we are doing everything on video conferencing. So it will raise to new working norms. So these are the macro and economic, macro and micro impacts of COVID-19. Coming to the next slide, we have the measures in light of COVID-19. The next slide, we have the recent measures which has caused headlines in the country over. It has increased the pecuniary jurisdiction, that is a threshold from rupees 1 lakh to 1 crore. Of course, it was done with a media briefing dated March 24, 2020. It has, of course, grossly affected a lot of NCLT and the insolvency code practitioners, but the government and the legislation in their wisdom have sought to protect the MSMEs and the small industries from any claim which may arise due to this entire COVID-19 situation. It has also come out with a notification which says that no fresh admission petitions will be filed against debtors under section 7, 9, and 10 of the code for 6 months, which of course could go for a year. It gives a moratorium of sorts. It gives a breathing time for the industries to come out of this very dark phase of their corporate lives, or of the history of the corporate entities. And of course, that period could extend that period could extend more depending on the current situations. We are also seeing a lot of measures taken by various adjudicating authorities and courts, relaxing the strict timelines as are stipulated under the code. We've also seen moratorium against financial repayments. The banks and the RBI have said that you don't have to repay. Also, the state government in Maharashtra has given not a guideline of sort, but has given out a statement, has requested, it is in the form of a requested, that landlords and etc. Should not force for license or bill payments in light of the COVID-19 situation. A very important fact, a very important notification, and a very gray area, according to me, are the suspension of contractual obligations. So if there are contractual obligations which provided for a supplier to supply goods from one area to another area, and in the midst the COVID-19 situation has arisen, what is the phase of that contractual obligation? What is the phase? What is the fate of that of the provisions of that contract? That is another very interesting aspect which us professionals are eagerly waiting. In the next slide, we have the penultimate slide, the future of legacy. Just like today's session, much before the entire area, we used to do a lot of in-person sessions. There used to be we have to be physically present, possibly you have to take notes, and then speak to a gathering of professional students, etc. But now times have changed. We are in a time where we are doing webinars, where we are doing YouTube sessions, video sessions. We are also in a time where we are wearing the full court attire. Of course, that has also been relaxed, where we are wearing the court attire, the professional attire, and we are addressing the judges, the courts from the comforts of our home. We are addressing Honorable High Court judges, we are addressing Honorable Supreme Court judges, we are addressing the learned members of the NCLTs, etc. And that is all being done through video conferencing. We are at a time that there will be more judges, there will be more benches, which will be taking more and more IBC matters. We will be at a time where there will be more dedicated practitioners of the code, because we have to understand that the code is hardly 4 years old. There will be a lot of intricacies. There will be a lot of provisions which has not yet been enforced. They will be enforced. And we will be needing a lot of dedicated professionals or practitioners of the insolvency. There will be more use of electronic evidences. We've come from a time, from 2003, where the Bombay High Court for the first time had introduced video conferencing for the recording of an evidence in a very in a reported case in 2003, where the use of electronic evidence was also expounded. And similarly, there were provisions entailed in the Evidence Act and the IT Act, of course. So there'll be more use of electronic evidences, dissipation of confidential information, dissipation of information necessary for the continuance of these provisions will be greatly relied on. There'll be greater use of electronic evidences and technologies. The use of 3 E's: efficiency, effectiveness, and to top it all, ethics will be greatly relied on. And why I say ethics is because of the fact that, and this I'll say from personal experience, that whenever we are arguing cases before any courts, uh, most of the statements are always, they're taken at the face value of the counsels, they're taken at the face value of the case, etc., especially on the counsels and the practitioners who are appearing before the courts. So there'll be a greater reliance on the ethics till the time when we have an absolute perfect system where dissipation of information or sharing of information is flawless. So till the time we don't attain that, there has to be greater reliance on efficiency, effectiveness, and ethics. There will be streamlined practice and management of the provisions of the code. We will have to segmentize, we will have to compartmentalize all the aspects of the code and its practice. There will be further relaxations. I apologize for the spelling mistake. There will be further relaxations on the timeline set in the code due to COVID-19 because of the fact that the future still looks uncertain. There will be more litigations, including the rush to conclude the backlog. This entire I do not know how many days we are in this lockdown. 70, less than 80. So there has been an immense backlog of cases. There could be a rush of new cases that have been filed. So we will have to prepare ourselves to deal with this problem. There will, of course, be greater monitoring and stricter stances by the adjudicating authorities. So no more tarikh pe tarikh. Okay, so that has to be kept in mind. And with that, I would like to conclude by saying that the next slide. I would like to conclude that these are uncertain times. Please be patient and please be positive. There's enough negativity all around. Rule of interpretations: please trust in legislative and judicial wisdom. We have seen in the relaxation given by the central government that the increase of the threshold from 1 lakh to 1 crore, but from when? So that area was a gray area, which again, one of the I think the NCLT, the Honorable NCLT at Ahmedabad had come out with a certain suggestion, had come out with this observation that it cannot be retrospective, but it has to be prospective, etc. And there are various propositions. So, rule of interpretation: please trust in legislative and the judicial wisdom, because that will again traverse the annals of the Supreme Court. We are the system. Please don't say that we have to go with the system. We are the system. We are part of the. We are very much part of the system. I think a lot of students are viewing this, so you are also part of the system. Please aid it and assist it. It is required. It is imperative. It is important. It is a beneficial legislation and not a recovery. This I say to you before the courts tell you this, because I've seen a lot of practitioners saying that our client has a recovery which is due against the borrower. So please don't say recovery. It is a beneficial legislation. That I will pause over here, and of course, I will invite questions.
Yes, Sankush. Okay. Hello, sir. The first question for today is, how does the government ensure that to protect the MSMEs from the impact of COVID-19 from IBC relaxation?
Can you come again with that question?
So the question is, how does the government ensures to protect the MSMEs from the impact of COVID-19 from IBC relaxations?
So again, Priyal, right? So Priyal, we'll have to
Yes, sir.
understand. So we'll have to understand where the why relaxations. So and in the absence of any relaxations, what will be the problem which will be faced by the Indian economy? So if the government had not come out with a relaxation of sorts, let's say uh, barring from filing any fresh petition against against again, fresh petitions under section 7, 9 or 10, or let's say increasing the threshold from 1 lakh to 1 crore. We'll have to understand that no business is working right now because of the threat of spread, of the threat of massive spread of the virus. So if no business is working now, so there is no income that is generated for that entity. And if that entity is itself is in a debt, or itself has doing his business from borrowed money, so in the absence of this relaxations, it will lead to complete collapse of these small industries or the small companies, and in total the entire market altogether.
Mm.
So the I think according to me, the legislature in their own wisdom uh, anticipated this, that and it's very basic economy. If पैसा है तो पैसा दे पाएंगे. It's very simple. This is the basic economy. So if there is no business, nobody is able to come, nobody is able to generate money, so they will not able to repay. And in the absence of any repayment, they automatically fall under the category of NPA, non-performing asset. So it's an asset of the bank which is not performing, hence the recovery. So I think legislature in their own wisdom, again, it has cracked open its monetary fund in lakhs of crores in aid of the MSMEs, and a greater emphasis of MSMEs because of the simple fact that they've done that by precedence, because India is a vast marketplace of these small scale.
Yes, sir. So the second question is, what happens to the notice that have been already issued to defaulting entities as a creditor as of March 2020 prior to the IBC ordinance?
So again, if the central government in their wisdom has come out with the relaxation that there will not be any fresh petitions that were filed, so there has to be an argument made that that the issuance of the demand notice itself initiates the entire IBC process, which has of course not yet been argued, but this is a proposed argument that could be made for a company which proposes to initiate or go ahead with the IBC. So if there is a query that comes from the bench saying that, okay, all fresh petitions are explicitly barred, and you have filed the petition after the notification date, but your argument is that you have issued the notice before that. So your argument in essence should be that the initiation of the notice itself constitutes the initiation of the entire code, which we have to see. And I'll leave that
Okay, sir.
for the senior counsels to argue. Will be
Yes,
very
sir.
interesting.
Sure, sir. Sir, the third question for today is debt restructuring schemes under Section 230 of Companies Act and introduction of code based prior pack are worth exploring. Can we get your insight over the same?
Of course, I mean, so there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I don't if the question is relating to that, and so in fact, there I have received a lot of news about a lot of acquisitions that are coming in from various parts. There we've seen the closure of various luxury brands because of the simple economic reason, because everybody is on a saving mode. There will not be an exemplary splurge on luxury products, as a result of which there are various mergers and acquisitions, conglomerations of various brands happening everywhere, even in India, and which of course leads to the strengthening of the business, which leads to the strengthening of the balance sheet of the merged entity, and which I think should be the ideal strategy for these companies to merge and then proceed.
Okay, sir. Sir, the last question for today is, what would be your recommendation for new entrepreneurs who started right before the lockdown?
Brace yourself. These are hard times. These are unprecedented times. There are various schemes. Of course, if you get yourself registered under MSME, you will have various benefits that comes along with it. Of course, there are certain parameters attached to it. But if you're asking me, I would only say, please brace yourself. I also consider myself to be in the same bracket. We are all entrepreneurs in some way or the other. And it's all about please be patient and please be positive. There are lots of positive advantages that will come out with it. You are again breaking barriers, you are breaking jurisdiction in every profession, because everything is now online. And we've still not explored the advantage that online platforms provide.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your insight on these questions. Now, I would like Miss Vaishnavi to give vote of thanks.
Sir, it was a pleasure and honor for having you amongst us for the session. I would now like to take an opportunity to give a vote of thanks to our guest speaker. On behalf of Thakur Ramnarayan College of Law, I thank you, sir, for your valuable time and enlightening session. And I'm sure that this must have definitely added a lot of knowledge to all our participants. A special thanks to the TRCL management, our respected principal, sir, Dr. A.K. Singh, Mrs. Priyanka Singh, ma'am, our placement consultant, our webinar team, and all our supportive teaching and non teaching staff for conducting this informative webinar and giving all of us a chance to gain immense knowledge. Lastly, thanking all the participants for being attentive and wonderful audience throughout the session. I hope to see you all again soon in our upcoming webinars. Till then, stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation.